Hey, good morning, everybody. Welcome to the War Room. Hey, this is episode 6, part 2, and I'm just going to jump right in there. Episode 6, part 2 of the War Room. Hey, if you watched part 1, I hope you did. If you didn't watch part 1, go back and watch episode 1 or episode 6, part 1. It'll make sense. Hey, I was pretty dicey. I was pretty real. And some individuals might think, well, Mike, in part 1, sound pretty harsh. Maybe borderline judgmental. Yeah, this is the War Room. And I said that we would talk about things that a lot of people aren't talking about. And so it is what it is. This is part 2. I'm in my truck this morning. Obviously, I'm not in the studio. And so if, depending on time, if I have to hit the road, you got to bear with me. A little bit of different scenery. Again, we're talking about a subject that it's either going to make you think and say, you know what, I've experienced something similar. Or it's going to upset you. It's going to upset you. And you know what? Here's what I would say to that. If you're the latter on that and it bugs you or it grinds you, maybe that's a good thing. Maybe that's a good thing. But before we really dive into this, I want to make something very clear. I have some brothers that I formed a bond with at my first duty station, the 25th Infantry Division Light, the Tropic Lightning out of Schofield Barracks, Hawaii. Man, I respect all those dudes. You think about it. A vast majority of those individuals, they did their one tour and got out. And we deployed to the MFO, the Multinational Force and Observers in the Sinai Peninsula. All right, Egypt, that hotbed area that's being contested by terrorists right now. All right, Hamas. Egypt can't control them, and they never will. In Israel, I don't even want to go down that road. Anyway, that's one of the most remote, mountainous regions in the world that has near freedom of movement for terrorist organizations. I've been there. I'm telling you, that little sliver, the Sinai Peninsula, wedged the very tip of the Red Sea. Anyway, those guys, I formed a bond with those guys, those dudes. You know who you are. One of them, we call almost, well, not every week, but every month. Here's my point. I'm not judgmental. I don't look down on individuals. I don't look at what you wear. I look at the heart and the mind. And that's the way it should be. So my point to all this is I have friends who never served in the military. And they mean a lot to me. I have friends that I went to combat with that I will never talk to again in my life. Yeah. Things that I will never talk about in this show. It is what it is. Let's move on. Again, I just want to paint the picture for you. Let's do the math, because some of you might be thinking, well, Mike, you put the uniform on. A soldier is a soldier is a soldier. Yes and no. All right. Remember I said for the most part, National Guard and Reserve soldiers, who are very important, they raised their right hand and swore the same oath that I did. And I take that serious. That I will support and defend, yada, yada, yada. So help me God. Let's do the math, though. All right. keep in mind, these are baseline numbers, and it's different for every individual. You take an active duty soldier who is on duty, whether you like to accept it or not, 24/7, 365. You take that one soldier and you compound that over a 20-year period, and we're talking days of training, days of becoming an expert, days of trial and error, days of putting on the boots. That's about 8,000 training days. You know how many hours that is? Remember, baseline. Then you take a soldier who does 1 weekend a month, 2 weeks a year, and use the same baseline for a 20-year period. Remember, baseline, don't get wrapped around the axle. Active duty soldier, approximately 8,000 days versus around 750 days of training. If you do the math, hey, think about it. I'm just going to leave it there. All right, think about it. Think about it. All right. In part one, I want to talk about 3 quick things, and then I'll probably wrap this up. The sun's coming out. Got a little bit more better lighting. Anyway, again, I'm not in the studio. You got to bear with me. I talked about why I am the way I am. When you watch your buddy die right next to you, that changes something. That changes something. But let me share with you one story about why I'm so passionate about doing the right thing. I mentioned VA disability and claiming all kinds of things. You know, right before I deployed to Iraq the first time, here's something that a lot of you don't know. If you're in the Ranger Battalion, let's talk about 275 Ranger Battalion at JBLM, Joint Base Lewis and McChord, Fort Lewis. There's an individual who got promoted out of his position in the Ranger Battalion. Senior level NCO, all right, a master sergeant. Well, what do you do in the Ranger Battalion if you don't have a slot on staff? You can't retain that individual because you're shortchanging them because that individual is getting promoted to the next level. So you know what happens? Hey, check it out. Master sergeant, you're just going to get promoted to first sergeant. You're going to put that diamond in between your rockers and your chevrons. But we don't have an open first sergeant slot. Highly competitive. We don't want to shortchange you, so guess what? Slide down temporarily to a line unit. All right, regular infantry. Start getting your first sergeant experience, and then the moment that a first sergeant position opens up in the Ranger Battalion, come on back. It's easy as that. This guy, his nickname was Little Joe. Here's why I'm so passionate. This guy came down and he could have had an attitude. I'm a Ranger. I mean, he already had it. He'd already deployed as a legitimate Ranger. Operator, 275 Ranger Battalion. And he walks down to our battalion and he brings all of that knowledge and that compassion and that discipline with him. You know what the first thing he did? He goes, hey, there's a basketball court in between the barracks that nobody uses. Guess what? I want plywood and 2x4s. That dude with his company built a mock house so we could do CQB. He ran a team leader course for the battalion. I'm telling you, let's fast forward to what happened to this guy. This guy, his company got tasked to leave Mosul and go to Tal Afar. Tal Afar was a funnel between Iran and Iraq. The day one that their strikers rolled in, all hell broke loose. Small arms fire, 30 caliber, RPG, mortars. Little Joe, first sergeant from 275 Ranger Battalion, was pulling air guard on the back hatch. That's who he was. Took an RPG right through the back, hit him and detonated and blew him up out of the striker, and he's laying there with parts of his guts laying out, missing part of his rear buttocks. And he looks down when the medics are looking at him. You know what he says? Well, guess I got to go home now. Immediately flew to Landstuhl, Germany, got patched up. Here's the deal. Special Operations and the Ranger Battalion said, hey, man, it was a good ride. You have an option to be medically discharged, go through the medical board, or you can stay in the military, but your days in the Ranger Battalion, you'll never be on jump status again. It is what it is. You know what his response was? All right, watch me. I watched that dude, that first sergeant, spend almost 2 years in the gym rehabilitating. I can tell you what he looked like when he walked in the beginning. Guess what? You never tell a Ranger no. I've never been to Ranger school. You know that. But I'm telling you, I've worked with a handful of Rangers, and I'm telling you, those dudes are on it. Yeah. He made it back. Sergeant Major, 275 Ranger Battalion. Rangers lead the way. Here's my point. That dude, that's the kind of heart and mentality that we need right now. Watch me. I'm never giving up. I'm not taking no for an answer. Woo! I tell you what, man. I got a lot of respect for that guy. I'm only going to share 2 stories because time is ticking, baby. I never believed that I was worth claiming some stuff, because I looked around me and I saw other individuals who were far worse. There are dudes that have seen way more combat than me. I recognize that, but I've seen enough. I come back from Iraq the first time, and our striker brigade packed everything up, sent him to Alaska, and the rest of the brigade said, hey, we're going to go to Vilseck, Germany. I was a staff sergeant. I'm not going to Germany. I had just came back from drill sergeant school, and I'm like, all right, well, I'll get on board the next striker brigade at JBLM and start that up. I'm in between. They said, hey, we need you to be an NCO to help a handful of soldiers they're going to get out of the Army. And we had all just come back from a year of hell. And I'm standing in formation, and I didn't understand PTSD. I didn't believe in it. I didn't believe in depression. I didn't know anything. We did not have a system in place at that time in the United States military to cope with years of combat, both in Afghanistan and Iraq. How do you come back to a peacetime United States and deal with all that? Here's my point. There was a guy that had in our platoon. I feel guilty for this. He had gotten hit with an IED and he had a major TBI. He was all jacked up. Obviously, he was spent time in Germany. Comes back. I don't know this guy, but I do know this. At that particular time, nobody really knew what to do. Just leave it at that. Man, he couldn't form a coherent sentence. He was a little bit deformed. He was jacked up. Man, we would stand in formation and nobody said nothing to him. He was in his own world. There were some soldiers mocking him. And I didn't make the correction. I didn't go drop the hammer on those guys. I ignored it. Yeah, I'm getting a little bit emotional here. Now maybe you know why I am the way that I am. All right. There is a difference between the peacetime veteran and the combat veteran. And I've said it before, and I'm kind of winding this down. I will never take anything away from you. I won't. Like I said in part 1, I spent my first 10 years in a peacetime army. And it was awesome because that's what I volunteered to do. All right? And I have friends that they got out and they went in on their path and their journey in life. And we are great friends to this day. I respect them and they respect me. They know where I'm coming from. I have a couple of friends that are like, you know what, man? Maybe I should have stayed in. I got it. Here's my point. Do the right thing. Be a disciplined soldier. Be honest with yourself when you look in the mirror and think about it. Because I'm telling you right now, like I said in part 1, I have a friend who's in the United States Army Reserve that just graduated. He's full-time reserve. He just graduated the Sergeant's Major Academy. He happened to be in the same class with Sergeant Major, and I'll just say it, I don't think he'll mind, Sergeant Major Sweeney. Newly promoted Sergeant Major. I know Sergeant Major Sweeney. He was sergeant while I was staff sergeant in the same battalion. We had the same friends. Guess what? I got out of the Army after 22 years. I said, I'm done, son. He's probably going to stay until 30. And he's now a sergeant major, and I was just a sergeant first class. I salute that dude. I'm going to end it with this because I talked about PTS. All right, PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. I leave the D off now. My wife helped me to kind of see this. Here's the deal. Am I on a little bit of medication? Maybe. The way the system works, something has to be classified a disease or a disorder in order to receive prescribed medication. Do I have a disorder? I don't know. I don't want to think so. Have I had skin cancer? Yeah, I probably have skin cancer right now. PTS, post-traumatic stress. Yes. I struggle with it. I have my good days and I have my bad days. Bottom line, it comes down to I've always had an anger issue, and it took me years to admit it. It took me years to try to open my heart and my mind, physically, spiritually, mentally, and I still struggle with it. If I struggle with it, I know you do. And that, again, that's why I'm posting these videos. If you get one thing out of this, mission accomplished. We all rose our hand and swore the same oath of office. You're important. It doesn't matter how many years you spent on active duty, how many years you're in the National Guard, how many years you're in the U.S. Army Reserve. It doesn't matter if you deployed to combat. if you did an overseas service, or if you stayed stateside. I salute you. I'm going to end this show, and I could go on and on and on and on and on and on. But again, this is the War Room, and we're going to talk about leadership. We're going to talk about current events. We're going to talk about all kinds of things. Again, if you didn't watch part 1, I highly suggest go watch part 1. Hear where I'm coming from. Whatever you decide to do today, woo! Hey, make it great. This is the War Room. Thank you for watching. Thank you for subscribing. I appreciate that. Stay tuned. Woo!